Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Heart of New Jersey podcast. I'm Kira, your host, and alongside me, we have Ron and Joe. So, welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you guys on the podcast. We're going to talk a little bit about the Tour of Somerville, the history behind it, how you guys are involved, and yeah, so I'm excited to hear more about it.
All right. We're good to go. Joe,
Yeah.
part international bicycle race, which we've known since 1940, part street fair, food festival, and a street-long block party. It's a happening and has been since 1940. Now, this year, we're going to celebrate its 80th.
Yeah, the big one.
The big one. And as Fred Pop Kogler, the founder of the event, said, it's the event that puts Somerville on the map. But I'm curious because in the past few decades, there's bigger races that offer more prize money, and sometimes now they get decent crowds like we used to get in the 30,000 range. But why is it still considered a must-win in the world of competitive cycling?
I just think the history, Ron, has been so long. It's been a well advertised event for many years. It was back then in the beginning as well, and a lot of the precedents for cycling in our country have been set on the streets of Somerville. I could go into things like free laps, but people wouldn't understand that. But there are things that became normal cycling happenings and started right here in Somerville. And I just think it's the one race that most riders would like to have on their list of victories.
How it started is an interesting story in and of itself. Bob Kogler, local bicycle shop owner.
Yeah.
His son Furman was a New Jersey State champion at the time, 1939, 1940. And apparently Pop got the idea because Furman requested a favor.
He said to Pop, and he was, by the way, Ron, a national junior champion the year before. And in 1940, Pop Kogler took his son Furman, his daughter Mildred, and Ron, and help me, the junior guy.
Right, coming back at me.
He took three riders to the national championship, and at the time, there was only three national champions: junior, senior, and women.
Okay.
And he drove these three young people out to Detroit. They all came back with national championship jerseys, which I don't think any coach has ever done.
Yeah.
Since then, and it's just fantastic stuff. But Furman said to him, as the story goes, and I worked for Pop Kogler, and we bought his business, but I worked for him, and I got all the stories. And the story from Pop was that Furman said, "Pop, I'm tired of getting up at 3:00 in the morning and driving out to Comac, Long Island, or Sag Harbor or wherever for a bike race. Can we have one in Somerville?"
Yeah.
And that was the seed that was sown, and 80 years later, here we are.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So the history has an interesting Memorial Day angle to it, if you will. That's kind of ironic, and it's become part of the Memorial Day historic tradition and the recognition of this event. There'll be a Memorial Day parade starting at 8:30 in Somerville that day of the race, always on Memorial Day. And as it was, 1940, Furman Kogler wins the first Tour of Somerville. Competitors from Canada, the Midwest, again, Pop Kogler said, where are these people coming from? I mean, it's a small race here. 20,000 people showed up, people hanging from rooftops, not hanging, but sitting on rooftops watching the event because it was so new and different and novel.
Yeah.
So Furman wins the first race. The second race, again, 1941, he wins two in a row. And that prompted a little bit of discussion, I guess, amongst the cycling community.
Yeah, some of the other riders are saying, "Yeah, Pop Kogler runs this race for his kid. Well, what's this all about?"
Yeah.
So Furman then his best friend was Carl Anderson, and he said, I won't ride." Then he said, "I'm going to help him. I'm going to coach Carl Anderson."
All right.
And Carl Anderson from Clifton, not Clinton, but Clifton, New Jersey, in North Jersey, wins at 42. So here we go to the Memorial Day angle. And again, it almost stops your heart in a second when you think about it. But both Furman Kogler joined the military, was in the Army, was in the Pacific Theater, and Carl Anderson was at the Battle of Bulge in Europe. Both lost their lives during the Second World War. So when Pop Kogler brought the race back, it was delayed for those years during the war. When he brought the race back in 1947, he renamed it the Kogler-Anderson Memorial. And since then, it's always been held on Memorial Day.
And
That's
the fact that
awesome.
the original ones, the original 3 races were held on Memorial Day, it
Yeah.
kind of makes the whole thing real kind
Really
of eerie.
special.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
extra special.
You can think about it for a long time, but almost meant to be.
Yeah.
I do have a question for Joe. He's been competing,
Okay.
as you say here, 21,
Yep.
22, 23-time national champion and a world champion in the multiple
Geezer
state
ranks.
Yeah, veteran world cycling World Cup cycling champ. But it goes back to the 1950s when you actually were competing. But what was your first memory of going to the Tour
Oh,
of Somerville?
my first memory was from 1953, and I said to my dad, I said they're having a bicycle race in Somerville today.
Mm-hmm.
He says, no, they're not. It's pouring rain. I said, no, I think they do this in the rain. If it's raining,
Yeah.
they
It
go.
doesn't stop them.
And he said, okay, so I'll take you down. So we come down, and I stand on the corner of Main Street and Bridge Street, North Bridge Street, watching them come by, maybe 3 times. I said, I've had enough of this. Let's go home. and so that was it. That was my introduction to the Tour of Somerville.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
and then a couple of years later, 1955, I guess, I was in Somerville High School, and I stopped at Pop Kugler's bike shop, and I said, yeah, I think I'd like to be in this bike race. And he didn't know me from Adam. And he said, okay, he says, here's an application for a racing license. Here's an application for the race. And he says, I have a bike up there that's mine. He says, you can borrow that bike.
Wow.
Didn't know me.
Yeah.
He know about as well as you and I know each other
Yeah.
right now. And I didn't do anything that year, but I went back the next year, and he remembered me, and he wasn't going to let me slip away as easily that time. He said, okay, here's the applications. There's a bike up there that will fit you, a used frame. He said, if you'd like a job, you can work that frame off. And that was how I started.
And that sense of community,
Yeah.
really, and passing on as a coach or as a mentor, that was part of what Pop Kugler
was all about, exactly.
Yeah. That's inspiring.
Truly an international event. 2 anecdotes, okay? Truly an international event over the years, been won by Olympians, Canadians, Australians, Belgians, go down the list. Most memorable winners for you, and this probably goes to right at the top of the list. Joe's known as the voice of the Tour of Somerville, has been up until a few years ago when he retired. So he did all the announcing, and we'll get to that in a second. But the opportunity to announce something that's so special, 3-4 years ago, Joe had that occasion.
And you did help me. That helped me out great that day. This was in 2017, and one of my grandsons is a professional cyclist, and
So it runs in the family.
It runs in the family. Yes, he is, and he pointed this out, that he is a 4th generation rider in the Tour of Somerville.
Wow.
And his great grandfather rode in the Tour of Somerville.
That's awesome.
And he had ridden a stage race in Ireland, and a stage race is multiple days. It was Sunday to Sunday,
Wow.
and approximately 100 miles a day stage. So he had ridden a 100-mile stage in Ireland on Sunday, caught the red eye back to Newark, and rode the Tour of Somerville the next day, and rode the beginning of the race. He's just what we call tail gunning. He was sitting on the back, just taking it easy, and then halfway through, he starts moving up very efficiently, as I pointed out to Ron during this race. And bottom line is, he wins the Tour of Somerville.
Oh my gosh. I can't even recover from taking an overnight flight.
And I'll tell you, I feel now as like I did then. And I had no words, and I'm running out of them now. Ron took over for me and called the perfect call of the perfect finish of the Tour of Somerville.
That's awesome.
Noah Granigan, my grandson, who was a professional
It
cyclist.
all came together.
Yep.
My anecdote, studying a little bit about the history of the Tour over the years, 2 or 3 that stand out. But the one that's probably been embellished a little bit over time was 1955. A Canadian bicycle racer, Patrick Murphy, got married on the weekend before the Tour of Somerville. And allegedly, he said, because he and his wife were going to honeymoon in Atlantic City, before we get to Atlantic City, there's this bicycle race in New Jersey that we have to stop. We're taking the bike, too. So lo and behold, he wins the race, and they're on their way to Atlantic City. And back then, you couldn't receive cash prizes, the only gifts of merchandise up until most recently, 20 years ago or so. So the first prize for the winner, among other things, was a bedroom set. So he and his wife on the way back, I would assume, stopped and racked it up on the roof and headed back to
man.
Toronto after their honeymoon. The question, for the first time, spectator, they see the Tour de France, they understand that. They may on the Olympics see the velodrome, indoor track racing. This is known as a criterium. How is that defined?
I like to describe a criterium as a race on a relatively short. In this case, it's a mile and about a quarter.
Okay.
But we race on things that are a kilometer, 6/10 of a mile.
Wow.
So it's many laps, and relatively flat, which is just completely flat, and with street corner turns, and closed to traffic.
Yeah.
So Somerville is the essence of criterium racing in our country, and I think it's probably in Europe there's more tolerance for bicycle races on the roadways, and you have big races. And as you know, I spend a lot of my mornings watching races streamed from Europe. Watched one this morning.
Have you ever been?
I have been, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I've raced in Europe and gone to the Tour de France to watch.
Okay.
But but in the United States, we don't have that ability to get races on the open road as much as they do, and so criteriums are the bread and butter of racing in the United States.
Okay.
And Somerville is, the Kentucky Derby of cycling, as
Yeah.
Bob Kugler used to say.
Yes, and as far as criteriums go, the strategies are different, obviously. It's a different type of competitor in some respects. And this great quote from the Belarusian rider who won some 20 years ago, and Russian Belarusian,
Victor Rapinski.
Victor Rapinski, after the race says, I come here for a bicycle race. It turns out to be a 50-mile-an-hour sprint from beginning to end. And that speaks to, the type of equipment these riders are riding. And now Furman Kugler's first 50-mile event that went out on Route 206 in a big loop and came back here, it was 2 hours and 7 minutes. And now that we keep records, the best times are around the low 140, 1 hour 40 minutes. So what do you attribute that to?
I attribute that to what you mentioned, equipment changing. I mean, bicycles were all steel bicycles back, when I started, and nowadays there's aluminum came along, titanium came along, and now almost everyone rides carbon fiber bikes that are lighter, and the tires have been improved. They never did testing on rolling resistance in the past. Well, now some manufacturer comes out with a new tire, immediately it's tested for rolling resistance, so it's either accepted or it's not accepted.
Yeah.
Plus, humans are better. Human beings have better nutrition. There's better training and so forth.
Yeah.
So it's but as we've spoken about in the past, I rode the Tour of Somerville in 1958. That was my first senior race in Somerville, and it was 1 hour and 59 minutes and change, and it was a record.
Yeah.
And everybody was staggered. We went 25 miles an hour. Well, now they go hour and 42 or 43 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
crazy.
and the record that when there was such a thing as a 50-mile record, they did away with it because it was too difficult and expensive to get your courses certified and everything. Okay. But when there were records, the 50-mile record for the U.S. was broken 9 times on this course.
Wow.
So
9 times.
the history parlays into records and winners and change of course. So that's a question I have with regard to the course itself. As we mentioned, at one time, used to go out on Route 206
Okay.
up to Somerset Street back. So each lap was about close to 2 miles. Now the course is condensed, and it's about
1.4, something like
1.4 miles, a little less than that. It begs the question, what's the best way to watch a bicycle race? A lot of people come to the start-finish line, and for 3 hours they stand there going, wow, wow.
I actually went for the first time ever, I went last year to the Tour of Somerville. And I didn't know what to expect because I had never gone to a bike race before, but we were near the start-finish line, and it's just like, okay, all right. So, yeah, I'm intrigued.
What I would normally recommend to someone coming for the first time is watch the start, because then you can see and hear the announcer introduce some of the top riders and so forth, and give them their instructions, which will answer some questions you would generate later.
Yep.
When you could come back and hear the announcer say something, and you say, what's he talking about? Well, it's explained in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then my recommendation is walk the course, but walk it backwards
Okay.
so that they're coming towards you all the time. You don't have to be
I
turning
like
around.
that.
And spend a couple of laps on each of the corners. The corners they vary in severity, in how sharp they are. The surface of the road's varying. The weather is sometimes is
Yeah,
varying.
last year it was on and off raining.
Yeah, so they were on and off, falling off too.
Yeah.
I didn't do too well last year with my Kentucky Derby picks, and I'm probably going not to do too well this year. But as a handicapper, we've got races coming from all over the world. They ride as part of teams. And on the men's race, 50 miles, $10,000 of prizes distributed to the first 20 finishers. Women's race, highly competitive, 25 miles with the same $10,000 distributed to the top 20 finishers. Any names stand out to you so far? You've been looking at the entry list, the pre-entry list?
I have, and unfortunately, the USA Cycling in their that's our governing body, USA Cycling,
Okay.
in their imminent knowledge, have scheduled the National Professional Men's Road Championship same day
Of course.
in West Virginia, Charleston, West Virginia.
Okay.
There are some guys on teams that there are criterium specialists, so they will be required to be at the National Criterium Championship, which is the Friday evening before Somerville. But those top crit guys will be here. The top road guys probably won't be here because they have team obligations in helping out, and I'll kind of stray a little off the point right now. But I used to always say that when I was announcing that they're only going to have one winner today. However, it's very much a team endeavor.
Yeah.
Because the team will decide who's the best sprinter, who's got the best chance of winning today, and that sometimes changes during the process of the race. But they will be working for one particular guy, making sure that they're chasing breakaways, making sure that if it's all together when they come for the finish, they're giving him a lead out. Because you say you went to the race last year, you were probably very interested or surprised to see how closely they ride together.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and they're doing this for a reason.
Very close.
It's for drafting purposes.
Okay.
So this lead out, as we call it, a lead out train, you'll get 4 or 5 guys on a particular team, with their sprinter being the 5th guy, and another sweeper sitting on him to make sure his wheel stays clean and none of the competitors get on his wheel, and the guy on front will go wide open for a lap. And
It's like with any sport, you have to work in a team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's even it's not like any sport.
Well, yeah.
It's very unique. It's
Definitely.
very unique. Yes,
Yeah.
because in the NASCAR racing,
That's exactly what I
there
was
are
just thinking
teams.
of, yeah.
There are teams, but you can get 2 guys from the same team, and they will compete with each other.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Very true.
One guy's not going to sacrifice his chance of winning
Yeah.
a NASCAR race. But in cycling, if there's a team of 5 or 6 guys, all but one are willing and able to sacrifice themselves
Yeah.
so that number 1 sprinter wins.
That's cool.
So in that team component, then I've noted in the entry blanks, early entries, there's an entire team of 5 riders coming from New Zealand,
Oh, wow.
and they've chosen to come here. Last year there were 3 riders from Germany. Teamwork, and you've explained the dynamic of that well.
Yeah, I've been to New Zealand racing, and they are rough, and they're like Aussies. They're crazy people. They're fun people.
Yeah.
And they are one hell of a bunch of bike riders, I'll tell you. And New Zealand riders have won Somerville, a couple of them, and I look forward to those guys coming. And the New Zealanders, the fact that the National Road Championship is the same day, which kind of dilutes our field a little bit here in Somerville, just a little bit.
Yeah.
But this is to the advantage of the specialists from New Zealand, and there'll be Aussies here. There'll be a bunch of Canadians. And it'll be an exciting bike race. And
I'm sorry.
Sorry. I'm just like intrigued by the fact that so many people come from all over the world to Somerville, and how that like really draws people into this area to see what we have to offer, in addition to the bike race itself. Just being able to see how great all of our businesses
And one
stuff
thing
are.
parlays into the next, because your support, your organization's support of the race as one of the sponsors, brings awareness to all your 4,000 members, 8,000 members. There's a
We're
lot.
800 members. Yeah.
800. Oh
Yeah.
my God. I'm prone for that's the story I
You
told
should-
before.
you should- you should
I'm going to go with the 8,000
Yeah,
though.
you should hire him.
But it exposes not only a county but the region to something that's unique. It's different, and as I said, it's a combination of a little bit of everything that's going on at the same time. Sports Illustrated writer about 40 years ago did a one-page article with 4 pages of pictures. It was phenomenal.
Wow.
Her name was Sarah Fligeti, and she said, "Welcome all to the free of charge event that Sports Illustrated once called, quote, the Somerville whirl and greatest bargain in sports." Because
awesome.
aside from the competitors who are paying entry fee,
Yeah.
it's all open
It's
and
free,
free to the
yeah.
public.
Yep.
On the women's side, one quick one. Tell us about the Laura Van Gilder story.
Oh,
And
Laura-
she'll be racing.
She will be racing, and she's
60 years old.
close to it.
Yep.
And she's been a world champion and a national champion many times, and she has won the Tour of Somerville 3 or 4 times.
Four
You
times.
probably know
Wow.
that 4 times. She's from Pennsylvania, from the Poconos in Pennsylvania. LVG, when you get known in any sport by your initials, you talk about LVG's coming. Well, that's Laura Van Gilder. So
Yeah.
to me, that's a big deal.
You're known.
And a quick Laura Van Gilder story. I've always loved post race interviews with Laura, and I did an interview before the race with Laura one year in 2017,
Okay.
2019, or 17, and I said I look forward to interviewing you after the race, and I said actually you're probably the second most important interview I'd like to do during the race. That was the year my grandson was riding.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, I can understand that. And well, when I interviewed her after she won the women's race. I interviewed Noah, and she came back and she said, well, you got your wish. You got everything. today."
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
And there is Laura Van Gilder on the right, winning that race in 1917, if we could see that. Probably by the width of a bicycle tire thread. Van Gilder winning her 4th Tour of Somerville on the right-hand side.
She's currently there's a new genre of, if you would, of bicycle racing and gravel racing.
Oh.
Which is off-road stuff, obviously, but the
Okay.
bikes look like road bikes, but they have little fatter tires and more
Okay.
clearance and so forth. And Laura is the Masters Women's World Gravel Champion right now.
Wow.
And she was Masters Women's World Cyclocross Champion, which is racing in a park on a course through mud and jumping over barriers and so forth.
See,
And so
I feel like the
she-
road one's probably a little easier than those. Those sound a little rough.
She's the complete bicycle
She can do it
rider.
all.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
That's cool.
The other thing that when this is viewed, we could put out the invitation. It just kind of fell into place about 6 years ago. I guest host 4 Canadian cyclists, 2 men and 2 women, the 2 couples, they're married, who ride in all the events, the preliminary amateur events as well as the professional events. And they come back every year. And last year they had brand new bicycles because they race for a specific team that supplies them with equipment. The cost, as Joe said earlier, enormous. So they came last year. They unloaded the bikes on a Friday night. They wanted to go out to Alfonso's for pizza. I hope you're a member of Alfonso's. If you're not, you are now.
Oh my God.
You just became one. And they unloaded the bikes. Said, "We'll just throw them in the garage."
Yeah.
And short of the fact there's no room in my garage, I said, "No, they go in the house and they stay in the house and
Yeah.
they stay secured in the family room." I said, "By the way, these are brand new bikes.
Yeah.
Each of you got a new one from the sponsor that sponsors you.
Okay.
How much are they each now?"
Yeah.
And $14,000 to $15,000 a
A
bicycle.
bike?
Yeah.
Oh my
No,
gosh.
Noah's the team that Noah's on now. The Blazers. They rode Canyon bicycles last year, and they each got a bike to train on,
Uh-huh.
and the team truck, the team van has. So Noah's race bike.
Oh my
when he goes to a race, he doesn't have to schlep a bike along with him.
Yeah.
Because he's got the one bike to train on, an identical bike that the team brings.
Wow.
And
That's nice.
they were riding Canyon bikes, and now this year they were the Miami Blazers, as you remember.
Yes.
Well, now they're the Golden State Blazers.
Okay.
And they have Harrow bikes. And Harrow is trying to make a big move into road cycling. So
What's like the best bike to have?
they're all the same.
They're all the same. Okay.
Hopefully some of my friends in the bicycle industry don't see this, but they're bikes are the value of a bicycle is usually predicated on the group, the gears and brake group that's on it, and the groups are different values. Some are completely mechanical, some of them are all electric right now. But yeah, most of the bikes are carbon fiber, and $10,000 to $14,000 or $15,000 is not out of the question.
So
and people are buying them.
Yep.
And people who don't race are buying them also.
Yes.
My dad just bought a very expensive new bike just to ride on the road. I'm like, oh my gosh. And
So
then he
they-
has like the assisted one for like mountain biking.
Yeah, an e-bike.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the conclusion to that story from last year when they dropped everything off, I said, well, they invited me to Alfonso's. That was nice. I guess they were sitting in my house for 4 days. They're great people. And we all went to Alfonso's, and I looked at Charlie, the golden retriever. I said, keep an eye on those bikes. Don't let them leave this living
You're in
room.
charge, Charlie.
I think I'd be remiss, short of time, if I didn't tip the hat to all the sponsors,
Yeah.
including yourself, the Somerset County Business Partnership. 880 members. I have it here, but I did exaggerate it. Coming in as a gold sponsor, our primary sponsor for the 5th year in a row now is the Unity Bank of New Jersey. Then we have other gold sponsors. I've got to mention them: Wolfgang Steakhouse, Downtown Somerville Alliance, Visit Somerset County. What is this? Land Rover of Princeton and Clinton Honda. Also, Somerset. Tino's Vodka. Don't ask me about that, but they've been supporters for 3 years now.
Hey, we love that.
PSG, Pop's Bicycle Shop, and of course the Somerset Patriots. The day is not just bicycle racing, so people who can come and go want to focus on the two main events. The women's race starts at about 3:30, and the men's race 4:45. But prior to that, we have a Memorial Day parade, a family fun ride for people who want to get on a bike. Your dad could come and try out his new one for 2 laps. And then there's preliminary races for amateurs, a kids' play area. The restaurants are open. There's a food and a bounce toy for kids out in the courthouse square. And lawn parties along High Street. Used to be back in the day where there would legitimately be 25,000, 30,000 people here, and people who lived in Somerville and worked in Somerville had homes on High Street. There'd be a party on every house.
That's
So
fun.
I always got the opportunity to interview the winner, and one year a guy from New England, Jason Snow, won the race. Friend of mine, and as most of them were, because we're a pretty small group of people, and in the overall scheme of life, and pretty much if
to
you're
know each
involved in
other.
cycling, you know most everybody.
Yeah.
So Jason, it took him a long time to come to do his lap of honor, and when he got back, I mean, he smelled like a brewery. So and he had I stopped at a couple of picnics.
He was celebrating a little
backstage.
early.
Yeah. Now I will say that there was only one guy in the whole time that got a real quick interview, and that was my grandson.
Yeah.
Because he finished the bike race and stopped and turned around and came back immediately.
Yeah.
And that's the only time I've ever seen summer. But guys do this in races, but in Somerville it's the only time I've seen it. And he came back for the grandmom hug and the pop hug and so forth.
That's nice.
It was a day.
Yeah, definitely. Do you guys want to tell our listeners a little bit about how you guys are individually involved in the race? I mean, we heard a little bit, but maybe some more.
I have been involved in the race since 1956 as a competitor, a helper, and then as an announcer. And I did probably 4 decades of announcing or close to it. And I was able to race at times in the Masters races during my announcing years, because Ron was my colleague announcing, and he would pick up the slack, and he had the opportunity, which I thank him very much, to interview me as I won a Masters race one year in Somerville. he had the opportunity to interview my wife, who won a Masters race in
Oh,
Somerville
that's
one year.
awesome.
So yeah, and my our involvement has been varied over the years, and but I'm probably first and foremost I'm a bike racing nut. I'm a bike racing fan.
Yeah.
If there's a good bike race being streamed
You're
on
there.
television, I watch it. If there's one nearby, I watch it. And this year I was torn really because when I see when the pro nationals are scheduled for the same time as Somerville, and not saying anything to Noah, talking to him, and I apologize for boring people with Noah, but he's kept my interest really peaked, but. He said, "I don't think we're going to ride the. I don't think I'm going to ride the road race, because he's been a full-time bikie and for years, and now he's kind of a three-quarter-time bikie and a full-time engineer with a bicycle company in Colorado. And he said, I don't think I'll be doing the road race. Well, that was fine. I didn't want to suggest it to him that I was going to miss the road race because I'd like to be in Somerville.
Yeah.
So his Criterium Nationals are Friday night. We'll be there in West Virginia, in the car, home. We'll be back for the Tour of Somerville. And they're doing this year, they're trying to get as many former winners and people who have been involved in the Tour of Somerville relatively heavily back for this 80th year.
Big year, yeah.
And as a coincidence, 80 the Tour of Somerville has been 50-mile race traditionally. Well, this year it's going to be 80 kilometers because it's the 80th year.
Okay.
Yeah, and 80 kilometers happens to be 50 miles.
Yeah, it works out.
A little bit of a twist.
Works well. Yeah.
Quickly, my involvement as a Somerville High School senior, I rode in the junior race with little or no training, because then it was kind of wide open at that level for anybody who wanted a good bike to get around the course. That was a 10-mile race, and I remember I was in the start line next to a guy, and a little jabber beforehand, and this guy sizing me up, and he said, "Well, who are you?" And I said, "I'm a local guy, Ron Czajkowski. I live in Hillsborough." "Oh yeah, well, who are you?" He gave me his name. He says, "I'm the Indiana National Junior Champion." I said, "Well, I think we're off to a good start." I lasted 8 laps with 2 other guys that got dropped behind. And back then, a car used to go around with this huge megaphone, and they used to around behind you. And when you were about to be lapped, they called out your number.
Oh,
they
no.
told you to pull off to the side.
Yeah.
And I was so happy to hear that. Embarrassed, but not on Main Street because my high school classmates were there. I just laid down under a tree and tried to get my faculties back. Since then, I've helped out with the announcing, some of the publicity, and now kind of immersed in digging into the history and finding unique stories to tell.
Yeah, which is awesome.
One of the it's a bike race. Everybody starts from the same spot, and a guy who finishes, or the young lady who finishes first after the distance, is the winner. Okay. We have what they call preems, which are special prizes within the race. In other words, and in the past, it's been wide open for the spectators would come up, with $10. I want to do a preem, on the 10th lap, or $100. I want to do a preem on the 10th lap.
Yeah.
And the announcer would announce it, and the bell would ring. A bell to a bike rider means one to go for something.
Okay.
So it would be a bell for the preem, and you'd get a sprint, which is entertaining for the crowd, and the bike rider helps fill up the gas tank going home.
Yeah, there you
And
go.
it's so it's not just go and whoa. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on in between, and we prided ourselves as being knowledgeable about the sport, and we had a twofold job. It was to keep the spectators aware of what was going on, and keep the spectators entertained, and also to keep the bike riders appraised of what was going on, how many laps to go, and so forth.
Yeah.
And the preems just kind of added to that, and
That was fun.
it was an exciting thing, and the announcer that took over after I retired, to me is the most knowledgeable guy in the sport right now, and he's a fantastic announcer. So
That's awesome.
you'll enjoy you and everyone else will
Yes.
enjoy themselves.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I used to say it'll be the fastest 2 hours that you've spent.
Definitely
However,
felt like that.
the bike riders went to mess me up on that one because they started going an hour and 40 minutes. So I just say it'll be the fastest time you've enjoyed in a long time.
We have time for one more story.
Of course.
Yeah. So C.G. Koch, I'll tell the
C.G. Koch.
first part, but you have a personal involvement.
I do, yeah.
He's a German cyclist who comes over Nobody really knows anything about him. He settles in Chicago. A team from Chicago brings him. Everybody assumes, for whatever reason, who is he? What is he? Does he speak English? I don't think so. Well, C.G. Koch, in a torrential rain, last year's rain here was bad. This was torrential, and people are huddled together.
Yeah.
The announcer's trying to make sense of what's going on. Well, C.G. Koch decides he's going to try to lap the pack. So one guy breaks away, C.G. Koch from Chicago, and he almost gets to the point where he's going to lap the pack, which is probably not advisable in that weather. And once you lap the pack, you get re-involved in the pack, and you kind of get lost in an accident. So he has the sense because his coaches are yelling at him. And then there's 5 laps to go, and people are cheering him on, 4, 3, 2. And there was a rule at that time, and Joe could pick it up here, that was just initiated.
Well, it was the year before. It was when the rule
Right.
came into place. And the year before, they had fewer preems than they have now.
Okay.
Preems is lap
Yeah.
special race within a race, as it were.
Okay.
And they always had a halfway sprint, and it was $100, which in the 1950s that was or 60s and early 60s, that's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And I went for the preem, and I won it. There's crowd. I mean, at the time they were advertised as 25,000 spectators. Well, this crowd is saying the announcer is Herb Hoffman was the announcer. Right. He's saying the local boy Joe Sailing, wins the $100 preem, and they're all cheering, and I went like that. Thank you. Next time around, I was taken out of the race because I took my hands off the handlebar.
What?
And didn't get the $100.
No.
So Ron picks up the story a year later now.
Yeah, so what's happening now is C.G. Koch is about to win this bicycle race in adverse conditions, but the crowd now is really into it. It's literally roaring down Main Street in Somerville. So everybody assumes that he doesn't speak English. So they start yelling in different languages: Portuguese, Belgian, French, no German, Polish. Well, they're guessing. Of course, his team that brought him down is advising him, do not raise your hands,
Yeah.
do not raise your hands. And he looks so stern and severe as he comes across the finish line. He didn't raise his hands. He got the message. And apparently in the interview afterwards, one of the first things he said was, "I know English."
Oh my gosh.
Very good. Ron, one more very quick story, and I apologize if I'm going over here,
you're
but foreign riders have won the race. New Zealanders have won. A couple of German guys have won. Multiple Canadians.
Russian.
Ever had any
Russian.
French?
We have not had a French winner that
Okay.
I'm aware of.
Yeah.
We've had guys that belong to the French Sporting Club, which is a New York club,
Okay.
win the Tour of Somerville, but
Argentinians,
yeah.
other South Americans.
yes,
yeah.
yes.
Okay.
And one year, a Belgian guy wins the bike race. His name is Mark Martens, and Mark Martens. And I have a friend who was a former teammate of mine that came from Belgium, Nestor Gurney. So I'm interviewing Mark Martens after the finish, and I have to do it through Nestor.
Okay.
So I said, ask him what he thought of the race and what he thinks of American riders.
Oh no.
So he jabbers away in Flemish to Mark Martens, and Mark talks back to him, and he says, as only Nestor could say, he says this was the greatest race he's ever ridden. The fans were absolutely spectacular, and quite possibly the Americans are the best criterium riders in the world. So we have this Dutch guy from Holland who was in our club, and he was one of the officials. He taps me on the shoulder and he says, "He didn't say that." So a couple of years later, Nestor and I, actually 5 years ago, Nestor and I went to see the Tour of Flanders, which happened yesterday. But we went to see the Tour of Flanders several years ago, and we got into the Tour of Flanders Museum, and Freddie Martens, Mark's older brother, is the curator.
Oh my gosh.
So I
how
got the
funny.
opportunity to tell Mark Martens the story about his brother Freddie,
Yeah,
and he says,
that's cool.
that would be like Freddie.
Yeah.
So it kind of brings things to full circle.
Yep.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a sporting event. Yes, it's where people bond. Yes, where the community gets involved and all these other things going on at the same time. Street fair, a food festival. People for the day are allowed to, open cup it on the street
Yeah.
without too much indulgence from, the authorities. And it's a learning experience that, best summed up by my two neighbors who went for the first time and said, 4 years ago, they just moved into the neighborhood, young kids. They said, well, yeah, it sounds interesting. Maybe we'll go and stay an hour. We'll walk and then we'll come back home. I said, sure. And I wasn't with them. And 4.5 hours later, I saw them on Main Street, whooping and cheering, eating pizza and
You
drinking
just get
beer
so into it.
for
Yeah.
one rider was wearing a number and a certain type of jersey in the men's race. And I said, do you know him? No, but we kind of like that. He's from Brooklyn, New York. And, that's kind of the magnetism that brings, everybody together. So
Yeah.
it is, as Sports Illustrated said, it's something special and free of charge.
Yeah.
And the greatest bargain, the Somerville whirl, as she wrote, the greatest bargain in sports.
It's got its own ambiance. It's got sounds that you don't hear anywhere else.
Yeah.
The sound of 150 bike riders coming down,
Yeah.
and the wind and so forth. And Jack Symes, who was a multiple winner, an Olympian, and a world championship medalist, Olympic coach, national coach, he called it white noise.
Yeah.
It sounded
Oh,
like white noise.
I like that.
Yeah.
And then going into a corner, if you're part of the crowd and you're watching, and all of a sudden you hear brakes squeaking, right? Yeah, something's going to happen. And the Somerville Rescue Squad, fire department, rescue squads from around the county, again, come to offer support services. And it's a huge volunteer effort, as well as the sponsors like your organization have been good enough to sustain it at least to the 80th year, and we're going to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
We always
That's
welcome
awesome.
those first aid squads and rescue squads. We always welcomed them there and glad they were there. But we had the one hope that they could just sit and watch the bike race the whole day and
Yes,
not have to do
definitely.
anything.
That's always the hope.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming in and informing our listeners more about the Tour of Somerville. This was super interesting. I mean, I've only gone 1 year, but I'm excited to come back this year. And do spectators have to register for anything? It's just free. Come.
Just come.
All
come.
right.
And it's the last Monday
Okay.
in May. That's the day
Last Monday in May.
Memorial Day is celebrated. For many years, it was on May 30th.
Oh, wow.
Regardless of the day of the week. And then I guess
I like the Memorial Day.
Yeah, well, I guess the federal government, sure, they make long weekends for people. So all the holidays fall on Mondays now.
Yeah.
But it ties everything together.
Exactly.
Yeah, and brings back the meaning of those original first two winners and the sacrifice they made for this country.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's maybe another podcast about Pop's involvement with an international series between Japan. Back in 1953, he got involved in a series with the U.S. riders competing in Japan against Japanese riders.
Oh, wow.
And this is the country that we were in the war with that took his son from him.
Wow.
So this is quite a story too.
Yeah,
next
definitely.
time.
Yes,
So
definitely next time.
we look forward to seeing you and everyone else.
Yes, we will be talking
on
again
Memorial Day.
soon.
Thanks
awesome.
again.
Thank
Good
you
job.
guys.
Enjoyed it.
Thanks.